We're taking a look as we're watching along here, this very special edition of Raw from Tacoma, July 2nd, 2001. We see the biker version of The Undertaker ride down to the ring and his wife on the back. What do you think of this version, this presentation of The Undertaker?
The American Badass.
Yep.
Isn't that what I mean? He was full on American. I mean, being a fan of Mark back to the Mean Mark Calloway days, his in ring ability, but I felt the mystique. I kind of understood because Mark had been there in the late 80s and now we're 13, 14, 15 years later. But I just, I thought, well, the Undertaker worked in the, I didn't say it in these words in those times, but I'll say it now. But the Undertaker really was red hot to me, or as hot as ever during the Attitude Era. Now we're kind of transforming in the American Badass. It just it to me it didn't have the mystique that the gong and the entrance and the mystiqueness. And I was a huge fan of Paul Bearer and their chemistry and everything that went with it. But I understood they wanted to try something new. Kind of looking at it in context, man, I guess you could say your top two baby faces, Taker and Austin, but both changing personas. That's interesting timing as well to kind of think through that.
We see he's wrestling A-Train here. Matt Bloom doing big things for NXT these days. Did you spend any time with him at all through your career?
Well, I mean, when he first started up there, yeah, I mean, I can't say that, night in and night out, but yeah, I was around him often. And always he's a thinker. I mean, I think that's the best way. He always he had the badass look and looked like he'd rip your head off. But at the end of the day, you start having conversation with him, you go, okay, this guy's a businessman. He's at these days he wanted to learn, and look where he's gone now. But yeah, you could see that at an early age, no doubt. Did I see this is for a title? This match that we're watching right now, Taker and what I don't want to. What did they call Albert at this time? What was his?
I think he's A-Train.
Okay, yeah,
I could be wrong on that.
yeah. Well, there yep, Albert. Okay, thank you, Silver. You're ready, buddy. You ain't sleeping over there. He ain't just waffle stomping. He's rocking and rolling.
Yeah, at this era, Stone Cold is the world heavyweight champion. Albert is the intercontinental champion.
Okay.
The Dudley Boys are the tag title champions. The European champions Matt Hardy. The hardcore champ is Mike Awesome. The light heavyweight champ is X-Pac. On the WCW side of things, Booker T is both the U.S. and the world champion. Palumbo and O'Hare are the tag champions, and Shane Helms is the cruiserweight champion.
So they brought all the WCW belts and exposed them that early, right?
Well, they're building towards the Invasion pay-per-view 20 days from here. So you're going to have a WWF tag title match and then a WCW tag title match and so on and so forth.
Got it. Yeah. Man, it's
I mean, it feels like a big opportunity, and as we said, it's been fantasy booked by the Aftermags for years and years. These days, we know TNA has a bit of a working relationship with WWE. We've seen a lot of their stars on NXT. Do you think they could do an invasion angle? Would it still work in 2021 or 2024?
execution is everything. I mean, the shorter answer is absolutely it can. It's when I think back in the territory era, the different kind of we'll call it invasion angles done correctly. If you really want to think about Randy Savage and how him and Lawler, that feud, because he had been the there's DDP appearing on screen, but when Savage stepping into the Memphis studios, 1960 Union Avenue, people knew that he had ran another promotion. The invasion angle can always be done differently. I think at the end of the day, the most successful invasion angle, and people, I'll ask you, but I truly think the NWO wasn't in. Look, it had different twists and turns, but was it an invasion angle? People thought, okay, here's a band of folks that all made their name in the WWF at the time, and they're taking over. And it obviously popped a huge number and did massive success. But it just depends on the execution of it all. But back to your deal, I think it could.
It's a fun day here. We see DDP come down and interfere in the Undertaker's match, so it's clear that that's what's next. But then his wife runs a little bit of distraction. Kane comes down, starts beating up on DDP, and now Sarah's going to get a little bit of that action too. Low blow from DDP or on to DDP here. It feels as if we're, hey, you remember this guy? We're going to have a couple of our guys take turns beating the shit out of him, and then we're going to have his wife kick him in the nuts. I don't really understand how we're getting over WCW here.
What I mean, and I don't think, well, the Who Killed WCW. That topic of discussion feels like it just keeps going and going and going. Do you think Vince said, "I got the library and I paid for that. I'm going to make sure I kill this brand"? So okay. Now, I mean, did that ever cross anyone's mind that by design? Because I do believe at the end of the day, him breathing down everyone's neck and he got his ass handed to him for 83 weeks. He made it a point that I'm going to come back. He readjusted the sales and just annihilated them in so many ways. And, worked smarter, harder. And, people on WCW side were not helping matters. But I do think Vince is the one who ultimately killed it. And I think we're seeing the final nails going into it right here. Wouldn't you say?
Well, I mean, that's the way it's going to shake out for sure. It just feels like a big opportunity storytelling wise. Was that ever any sort of crossover invasion angles ever discussed to the best of your recollection in Memphis or in TNA? Like times when you had influence in the backstage area. Do you remember it ever being seriously discussed? I mean,
Well, and
we know how worked the tease of it was with the NWO, but in the other iterations of your life.
yeah, well, I mean, in Memphis, gosh, I'm just trying to think who would have had him up, but I mean, it depends on kind of the slant you took it. But when you look at the Texas WCCW story, that the whole mindset that my father looked at was based off of, in a lot of ways, the syndication money, and it was big money and generating a lot. And the brand that was going to be syndicated that my dad owned, he owned it wholly. There was no red tape, was USWA. So he had to figure out a way to make the USWA brand the brand that was front and center, but not only that, well accepted by the fan base. And so he started methodically in Skandar Akbar, who were the heel and the storytellers, and ingrained in that product for years and years and years. He made them the, for lack of a better word, kind of the evil empire. And so they started aligning with that. And Eric Embry, the people's champ, if you will, he's the one who did the right promos and he got the people backing USWA. So that invasion angle of kind of reverse, but because WCW had been the brand in the market for years and years and years, and USWA were the babyface invasion folks, but they told the right story. And when Eric Embry, who had been a heel for the most part in that Texas market for years and years and years, but had flipped babyface, aligned with USWA, and Akbar, who had been a heel for years, was the face of WCCW in so many ways. When they did the match, and Percy Pringle is what he was called at the time, and Eric Embry went over to that wall and they literally tore down the WCCW banner and got a huge pop. Conrad, I think that was a unique story that really got over. And from a revenue standpoint, boy, it made it clean. And, you know, watching that Iron Claw movie not too long ago, just the parts of that were, obviously it's a fictitious story in a lot of ways, or it's a Hollywood story. I'll say that they didn't touch on it, but Conrad, back to your point, have I ever been a part of an Asian angle? I lived that week to week. That was is super successful.